believe in the gun. And our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Former SMU head coach, distinguished member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2020, only head coach to win both the NCAA championship in '88 as the head coach of Kansas, and the NBA championship, which was on TV last night on ESPN, which I was watching as the coach of the Detroit Pistons. I got it some more, but I don't want to take much more of our time. Unbelievable player at North Carolina and played for Frank McGuire and Dean Smith. He was a draft pick of the in the NBA, 7th round, 55th pick. The Baltimore Bullets, coach, I love them. I love those uniforms. And then played for 5 or 6 years, and then started up as an assistant coach at North Carolina, Carolina Jaguars, and then or the Cougars, Denver Nuggets, UCLA, New Jersey Nets, Kansas, San Antonio Spurs, the Clippers, and Indiana Pacers, 76ers, Detroit Pistons, where he won the NBA championship, then to the Knicks, Charlotte Bobcats, and then to SMU. His accolades as a player and a coach are unbelievable. I don't want to hold up more time. He did coach internationally in the Olympics. Coach, we're unbelievably grateful that you're on and hanging in there with us.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the delay. I'm not technology smart, but I'm anxious to visit with y'all.
Coach, can we keep you a little longer? We don't have anybody coming after
Absolutely.
you. Can we keep? Okay. So, hey, Coach, my first question is this. You've been around some unbelievable coaches, not just, as a player and as an assistant and then as a head coach. I just wondered if there's a common trait, a common characteristic, a common theme that you see in all these successful coaches that you could talk about and share just your path in this journey to where unbelievable achievement as Hall of Fame, the Naismith, and then the College Hall of Fame. You were in the inaugural class in 2006 with some unbelievable coaches, and you fit right into all those. Could you just talk about the journey, the coaches you've worked with, those two questions, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I used to read Chip Hilton books written by Claire B., who was an unbelievable coach, and I wanted to be a high school basketball, baseball, football coach, teach American history. I had a great high school coach, Bobby Gersten. Went to Carolina. Coach McGuire recruited my mother, and I played for Dean Smith and Frank McGuire. I played on the Olympic team for Mr. Iba. I played for Goodyear for Hank Vaughan. I played for John McClendon, Alex Hannum, Dave McCarthy. I can go on. And then I've sat with some of the greatest coaches of all time, in my mind, that are now coaching or working in the NBA or college in some capacity. And I think when I look at them, they weren't afraid to coach. They respected the players, respected the games, but they had values. They weren't afraid to hold everybody accountable. I think the big thing I noticed is they were inquisitive and wanted to learn. They accepted information, but they didn't teach anything they didn't feel comfortable teaching. And they were relentless in what they believed was right in telling the players. So for me, the opportunity to coach great players, to sit next to unbelievable great coaches, and to have the opportunity to be around the greatest coaches ever, that molded my values. And I've kind of stuck with them throughout my career.
Coach, last night I was watching
Hello?
the 2004. Last night I was watching the 2004 NBA championship game of the NBA with the Pistons, Detroit Pistons, and the Lakers. And Doc, the coach of the Doc Rivers was talking about you and how hard a worker you were, and then also how you always wanted the team to play the right way. I was wondering if you could talk about what the right way is and some of the key points and how you coached your teams and how you really coached them to be players and not just a system type player. If you could talk about the right way and your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the right way depends on what your values are. You know, I go to too many clinics where people are asking you things about, give me a great play, a great out of bounds play, a great 3-point play, a great drill or something like that. When I went to North Carolina, before every practice on the board was play hard, play smart, play together, have fun. And then I remember asking Coach Smith if it would be all right if I wrote underneath, it'd be nice if we defended and rebounded. So I kind of think that's the right way, because if you have a tendency to play hard and play unselfishly and try to defend and rebound and make your teammates better, you have a chance to be successful every single night. But that's got to start in practice. The players have to hear one voice. They have to respect your values, and they have to step on the court and understand that it's a team game, and their job is to make everybody on their team better by doing the things they do well. And a coach's job is to make them understand that the values that they believe in is going to lead to some success.
One of the questions from the people who are listening right now, Coach, they're asking, what are the top characteristics needed to be a coach? And maybe another one, as I look at your records and successful coach, but you've been around such great people and mentored other ones and got them into the profession, and they're now head coaches or on the administration side, management side of pro basketball and college. What are some of the characteristics you look for or you saw in some of these candidates or these people that worked for you and that you played for and coached with?
Well, I always told all my assistants that I can teach them all the basketball I've been taught, but I can't teach them to love me. So to me, loyalty is probably the most important thing. And then to understand that the kids we coach, we have to make them understand that we care about them. And that's not always an easy task. I think it was a little easier back when I played and when I started, and as my career evolved, than it is today because of the social media and parents getting involved. My mom worked her whole life to try to make my brothers and my life better. Now I see so many young kids that are put in a position where they're asked to make their parents' life better. And it's very difficult for coaches to make kids understand that they have their best interest at heart. Watching this Michael Jordan special on ESPN, you see the role his parents played in his development. You see what Coach Smith meant to Michael, and you see how Michael worked at his craft so hard. You see, unfortunately, with Kobe passing away, we hear how, hard he worked to become, such a great player. I tell everybody, talent's a gift from God. Character's a choice. And I've coached so many guys that a lot of people would look at and say, hey, they weren't kind of special. But in my mind, they were truly special because they came to practice every day with a willingness to learn They cared about their team. Their values were unbelievable. And it was all about doing the right thing. I think I coined the phrase play the right way because of the influence people had on my life. And I think if you're going to be a coach, you have this responsibility to do everything you can to make kids better and also make them understand the values of playing a team sport.
Coach, I'd like to take you back to playing in the Olympics and coaching in the Olympics. What kind of experience was that? I know you went right from winning the NBA championship to the Olympics, but I just thought, what was it like to be on both ends of it as a player and a coach, international play? And how did you like the international competition, playing-wise and rule-wise?
I was lucky enough to play on the Olympic team in '64 for Mr. Iber, John McClendon, and Hank Bourne. And after that, I was asked to help in on a lot of the Olympic teams. I almost had a chance to go with Coach Smith when he went to Montreal, but at that time, I was a pro coach and he wasn't allowed to take me. Representing your country is incredible. People forget in 2003, we had to qualify to make the Olympics, and we had to play Argentina in the semifinals. If we lost, we didn't even get to participate in 2004. 9/11 happened, and the team that was selected in 2003, most of the guys didn't go because of 9/11. 2004 was really difficult. We didn't have a lot of time to practice. We had a completely new team. Kobe couldn't come. Karl Malone lost his mom. And, there were a lot of guys who were afraid to travel at that time. And we didn't do so well. We came in third, but that was one of the greatest experiences of my life because a lot of guys sacrificed to go to those Olympic Games. Since that time, when Jerry Colangelo took over, now they select the team by practicing. They prepare young kids to play for USA Basketball. The values have changed dramatically. Krzyzewski and his staff done an amazing job, but people forget, they had 95 practices and came in third, in the World Championships early on. But I think Colangelo, understanding that the game was getting better worldwide and we had to have a better process of putting teams together, that the game of basketball has really grown and it's gotten better. But for me, be able to participate for our country in a lot of different ways is something that I'll cherish. And I'm going to continue to be a big fan of USA Basketball and what we're trying to accomplish.
Coach, I think you're the only head coach ever to win a college, Division I, NBA, and the ABA. I was wondering if you could walk us through that, the ABA, what it was like to coach in that time. I love watching those games, and then going to the college level and then to the NBA. If you could just walk us through kind of the story and the history and the path of those three championships, I think would be very interesting.
Well, the ABA was really unique. You had mentioned I was the 55th pick in the draft. When Baltimore came to see me, the GM said I was too small. I was smaller than he thought. And at that time, if you tried out for a team and accepted one meal, you were a pro. So I never even went to training camp. I signed with Goodyear, which was an amazing experience. We won the Industrial League Championship and then won the AAU Championship, and that's how I got to play, participate and try out for the Olympic team. But that was wonderful. The ABA, to me, is almost like the league is playing now. we had a 30-second clock, and I don't remember us ever scoring less than 100 points. I think Doug Moe, who was with me throughout most of my career, his teams averaged 126 points a game. It gave little guys a chance to play. It gave so many other young players a chance to play and grow. Guys like Julius and Moses Malone and Spencer Haywood and Charlie Scott and Roger Brown and Tony Hawkins. I can go on and on. And when the leagues finally merged, we were only down to 7 teams. The NBA took 4 teams in. We weren't allowed, the ABA teams, to participate in the NBA draft, and we weren't allowed to participate in the dispersal draft. Yet 2 of the 4 ABA teams that went into the NBA won the division. Indiana, Slick Leonard's team, and Denver, a team I was lucky enough to coach with Doug Moe. And I think half of the All-Stars were made up of ABA players their first year. I think 10 of the guys out of the starting team, 5 guys started that were ABA players. But it was a whole different style of play, more open. Coaching college to me, I think I was more of a college coach. I loved practice. I thought you had more time to prepare in terms of practice. But there are a lot of other things in college that, took away from the time you got to spend with your kids, which was kind of frustrating for me. As a pro coach, it was all basketball. You had an opportunity. I coached the same way in college and pro. Every drill we did was basketball specific. I trusted my coaches. We didn't have 15 coaches. We had probably 3. I came early, stayed late. I was sensitive to the guys that were playing a lot of minutes. The guys that didn't play a lot of minutes, we had a regular practice because I was so fearful that a young player would get in the game and he wouldn't be prepared to play. So it was really important that we got a lot out of practice. And, we can talk on and on. I go to clinics again and I tell everybody, don't teach something you're not comfortable teaching. And be inquisitive, learn as much as you can. And then when you do teach something, feel confident you can teach it the right way and help the kids, execute properly. And my whole thing was, about playing unselfishly and guarding like crazy. So most of our drills were directed at playing defense and rebounding the ball. Each of my assistants had, different responsibilities, but they always shared all their knowledge with me. And every one of them that ever sat beside me made me better. And for the most part, I think every one of them almost went on to become a head coach in some capacity in the NBA or college. And that's the greatest gift of all, because I was given that opportunity with Coach Smith. I was the freshman coach as well as the assistant varsity coach. I never missed a practice. I used to in the morning, I used to give them a practice plan for the freshman team, and they'd look at it and hand it right back to me and never offer any information. And when I'd come back after practice, we'd go over how it went, and he'd share his ideas with me, but never prohibited me from growing and getting better.
Coach, can I ask you about culture on your team and how you got all of them to row in the right direction? You coached, like you said, everybody the same. Could you talk about culture, motivation, leadership?
Yeah, well, I remember, Coach Smith talking to me about this. I personally could kind of tell guys that, he might have favored, but he treated 1 to 15 the same way. He showed everybody that he cared about them. And that's not an easy thing to develop. You know, I look back on my career, and there are a number of guys that I feel bad about that I don't think I did the kind of job I needed to do to help them grow to be as good as they were capable of doing. But I never went to one practice or one game where I didn't try to do my best and bring out the best in each player. And I think that's critical. If you look at my path, I only took over one winning team in the NBA, and that was Detroit. And I followed Rick Carlisle, and a lot of his values, I think, were similar to the values I was taught. And I think that enabled that transition to be a little easier. But a thing I always remembered, going to a new situation, either college or pro, there was a reason that a lot of these programs weren't really successful. I don't think there was a tremendous connection, especially in the NBA, between ownership, GM, and a coach. And the only way you're going to succeed on that level is if there is a common goal where nobody gets between that circle and breaks it up, where the players hear one voice. You might have disagreements, but at the end of the day, the players would never know about it. And I remember going into every new dressing room in the NBA, the first thing after 2 practices, the players would know whether you could coach or not, because participating in the practice that you and your staff did, they would kind of know whether you could coach or not. The second thing I thought that was important, they would know after a while whether they could win with you. And those 2 things were really important. And then the third thing I think I found out was if this coaching staff can make me better, you know, then I'm going to make more money. But the thing that I thought trumped everything, and that's what I think all coaches need to do, really focus on, is you got to develop a trust where the players know you care about them. And you know every day that you go to practice, you have one goal in mind, is to make them the best player they can possibly be. And once you develop that trust, you really have them. And they're willing to do almost anything for you. You know, my high school coach teased me and said, if you want to coach an easy sport, coach track, because all you have to do is say, stay to the left and hurry back. But if you want to really be a great basketball coach, you got to be willing to learn. You got to be willing to accept information. But the most important thing you got to do is you got to care about the people that work with you, and you got to really care about the kids that you're going to coach, and give them everything you got every single day you step out on that court, and always be available to them for anything they might need. You know, when I was in college, I told the parents, you know, you can talk to me about anything you want, about academics, about a summer job, about issues that might come up with your son that might be difficult for them to handle, but you got to trust me and my staff to coach your son. And I think that's really important. And then you cannot be afraid to coach the kids you're given that responsibility to do, as long as you know the things you're telling them is right.
Coach, you mentioned practice. Can you walk us through what a preseason practice would be like for you, how long you practice, and then how this practices would change throughout the season? And then maybe some of your favorite drills and why you did them?
Well, you laugh at me. You know, I remember going back to a reunion with my KU guys, and they always got on me about silly things that I did, but I always asked them, what did you remember most about practice? And they would tell me the clock. And I'd say, what do you mean? They said, well, Coach, there was a clock in Allen Fieldhouse, and we knew after 2 hours we were halfway through. So I was kind of crazy about practice time. But everything we did was fundamentals, and every drill we did was basketball specific. And I mean things that were specific to the way we wanted to play. And we probably spent 80% on defense, you know, and rebounding the ball and sharing the ball. When I first started out, I wasn't much of a guy for running plays. You know, I came back from the Olympics from playing with Mr. Iba, and he taught a zone offense to us. And I used to keep a notebook of every one of our practices. We had 30 practices prior to the Olympics when I was with Mr. Iba. We practiced twice a day and had one meeting. And when I came back to Coach Smith, I showed him Mr. Iba's, you know, zone offense. And Coach ended up deciding, hey, I'm going to make this like our passing game. And the reason he used passing game, a lot of people talk about motion, because he wanted the guys to pass the ball. One of my favorite coaches of all time, Bobby Knight, invited me to Indiana. I spent a lot of time with him before I took the UCLA job. And I saw he spent most of his time teaching his kids to pass and screen and cut. He never talked about dribbling. He never talked about shooting the ball, but it was all about learning how to play together. But none of those guys that I mentioned ever taught a drill that they didn't know and know how to teach it well. I went and heard Bear Bryant talk, and when he was allowed to recruit the black athlete at Alabama, he had to change the way he coached. And he ended up putting in the wishbone. And I remember him saying that he didn't put in the wishbone until he felt he could teach it better. So my thing to all these young coaches that, you know, want to do a good job and want to help and develop young people, don't put a drill in or don't put a play in or don't do things that you don't know about and are comfortable teaching, because that's our responsibility. And I know people might say I'm crazy about this, but people spent a lot of time with me talking about negative and positive responses. In my own heart, you know, I think I spent a lot of time correcting guys, but I think the great coaches have a tremendous imbalance in the positive responses they give to players, because I think that's really important. The more positive information you can give them based on the things that they do, the more inclined they are to do them and do them well. Now, you can't be afraid to correct them. I think that's very important. Most of the guys that I work with tell me that I stop too much. I stop the kids too much. Coach Smith used to tell me he felt he didn't allow the guys to run up and down the court enough because he didn't want to let a mistake go. And I think that was a problem that I probably had throughout my career. But I always felt it was important if somebody didn't do it right, that I explained it to them and tried to get them to understand how important it was to do things right. But I also hope I was man enough to make them understand when they did something right and made their teammates better and did something that we valued. We were all prepared to compliment them and let them know that how important it was and how much we appreciated that. We did shell drill every single day, both full court and half court. And I would most of the time do the defense, but while we were doing the drill, I had our assistants teach offense while we were doing the shell drill. You know, I go to practices now. I'm so lucky. A lot of people invite me to watch their teams play and practice, and they ask me for advice. But I think I'm the one that always learns, and I'm always afraid to offer too much information because I think a lot of people feel like maybe I'm a threat. And that's not in any way what I'm about. I want to share all the things that I was taught, because I think the people that taught me knew the right way to play. But everybody asks me, Larry, give me a great closeout drill. And I say, all right, I'll give you the best one I know. Why don't you play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 every single day? Because by doing that, your big guys will become more athletic, because it seems to me everybody's switching everything and the game's so similar now. And I said, and if everybody can understand how to guard 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, you won't be spending a lot of time closing out. And then they all ask me, give me a great rebounding drill. And I say, well, every time you do a drill and it ends up with the ball going on the backboard, emphasize how important it is for your team to rebound, 1, offensively, and 2, defensively. And have your assistants or somebody on your staff conscious of that every time a ball goes on the backboard. Because when you do rebound the ball, there's got to be an idea in your mind how many guys you're sending to the offensive board and how many guys you're sending to the defensive board. Because shot selection, to me, is one of the most important things there is in our game today. And when I coached Allen Iverson, we allowed Allen to shoot the ball every time. We became the best offensive rebounding team there is, because we never was surprised with a shot. And we became the best defensive transition team in the league, because, you know, we understood when a good shot was coming up. And lastly, don't be afraid to tell a kid the difference between a good shot and bad shot. And don't be afraid to tell a kid, you know, Reggie Miller can shoot this shot, but maybe George Lynch, you can't shoot that shot. But I value you both as much. And George, whenever you can shoot the ball and I know it's going in, don't ever hesitate to take it. So I'm probably talking too much, but that comes between your coaching staff, the players, and your values. So everybody knows they have a role, and everybody's excited to do their role every single night, and that's to make their teammates better.
Coach Brown, Troy Hilton from the NABC's got a question for you.
Coach, how you doing?
Great.
It's good to hear from you
I'm
again.
all right.
Thanks for spending some time with us today. I just had a curiosity question. You know, you've coached at different levels. When you jumped from the professional to take the UCLA job back in college, and then you went back into pro, were there any things when you were in the college game that your NBA experience helped you, gave you an advantage on, or you felt was an advantage, or any of your college experience give you some stuff that you were able to help you in the NBA process?
I think both ways. You know, the one experience I had, I went from Kansas to San Antonio, and I missed 5 years. And we were terrible my first year at San Antonio. Red McCombs, I was really lucky that he kept me on, because we only won 21 games. And it was almost like a new sport. But to be honest with you, I coached pro in college almost the same way. You know, as the game has evolved now, we have so many more young kids playing on the professional level. And we have a lot of different kind of coaches now. When you saw coaches in the past, they didn't get in it for the money. And most of the coaches in the past started out as high school coaches, maybe assistant college coaches, and maybe a college coach. So there was a learning curve. But I basically coached the same way. I was a little more sensitive about time management because, you know, NBA players play so many minutes in such a short period of time that you got to be really sensitive about them. But I was never sensitive about the guys that didn't play a lot of minutes. Our staff had a regular practice, you know, after a pro practice. And we taught fundamentals. And we knew that by the time one of those young kids got to play, if we didn't have that extra practice time, he could never show you the things he was capable of doing because we were playing so many games. So I always felt it was a responsibility for us to teach those kids, whether we before practice or after practice. And as an NBA coach, I used to have my guys knock on my door and ask me to find a gym so we could work out and improve our game, which was something that I loved. I hated games. I always had this anxiety that our team wasn't prepared for something we might see. But once the game started, yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the competition. But I always felt the things we did in practice, we could handle, you know, things we might see in a game because those are the things we practiced against. And one of the big things I learned going from pro to college and back, whenever we saw things that teams were running, both offensively and defensively, we put that into our package. You know, if there were NBA teams that were running 5 or 6 plays, which you could probably see, you know, now today, almost everybody's running the same plays. We put that into our offense as soon as we felt comfortable teaching it because we knew we were going to play against that type of situation. So that made us better prepared each day. And we spent more time worrying about the way we played than worrying about who we might play, because in the pros you play so many different teams in such a short period of time. And it was the same way in college. You know, Bobby Knight and Pete Newell came to one of my practices and they said, Larry, you got to look over your practice, your schedule, and see how many teams are going to play zone against Kansas. And I said, why would I do that? And they said, well, if you're going to see that, you got to devote, if teams are going to play you zone 50% of the time, you got to devote enough time in practice to be able to attack a zone defense. Because if you're a man-to-man defensive team, your team's going to play against that every day in practice. So you got to be prepared to play against zone. So we put a zone in at Kansas. We put a zone in at UCLA because when we practiced against the zone, it was pretty good. And that prepared us when we played against other teams that may play zone.
Coach, can you talk about scouting a little bit? Like, what were you looking for in teams that you were going to play against? What were the biggest things you wanted to know to prepare your team? How much video? Just how much did you look at? What you look at? What was the most important characteristics for you and your team in scouting?
Well, I gave each coach a responsibility on my staff. It was in college. Each coach might have 7 or 8 teams to scout, and they handled a lot of the shoot-arounds, which originally never occurred when I first started coaching. There were never shoot-arounds before a game. And in the pros, I did the same thing with my staff. Each coach had a number of teams to scout. The things we looked at is, you know, had they guarded ball screens, you know, how they guarded the post, how they guarded isolation, how many people they sent to the board. Because, you know, when we played a team that never sent anybody to the offensive board, you know, it was difficult to run on them. So we understood that, hey, they're going to be back, so we better really have something good to attack them. If we knew a team that never ran, we would send 4 or 5 guys to the offensive board. And we try to look at characteristics. And then if a team ran a couple of things that we never maybe have ever seen, in the practice, we would at least show the team how we would play against them. But it was really basically about how we played. We were pretty simple in how we played ball screens. And, pick and rolls have evolved over the years. Years ago, nobody ran a ball screen because that would create a double team. Now that's all you see. Side, middle ball screen, angle ball screens, how you going to play it. And I didn't want it to be too complicated. So, we talked about how many guys we're going to send to the offensive board when we scouted and how many guys we needed to get back. We played Oklahoma. We sent 2.5 guys to the offensive board. We played Nebraska with Moiba. We sent 5 guys to the offensive board because they didn't run. We decided on how we were going to guard the post, and that never deviated unless we played against a guy like Moses Malone. Because we used to 3/4 front or completely front or get somebody off the spot. But Moses was such an unbelievable offensive rebounder. If you fronted Moses, he got 100 offensive rebounds. We very rarely doubled the post, but there are times we did. Whenever somebody ran in isolation, we loaded to the ball. And we made sure that when that guy was isolated, he saw 5 guys in a position to guard him. And I know college and pro have different rules pertaining to a zone. I wish we'd, have one set of rules, to be honest with you. But if you told me people watched the game last night, when Kobe had the ball, we had 5 guys ready to try to guard Kobe Bryant because you couldn't stop him. There's no way you could stop him. You could just hope that you cut down his percentage. We very rarely double Shaq because he was an amazing passer that I don't think people understood. And every time I see Shaq, he gives me a hug because I think he averaged 40 points a game against us. But scouting is important, but I think preparing your team on the first day of practice, anything they might encounter, is the most important thing. And lastly, we didn't spend a lot of time on film as a group because I think attention span is really critical. But individually, my staff and I, we spent a lot of time with players because they could accept things that you were trying to say to them, on a personal relationship instead of in front of the group. It's not always easy for kids for you to point out things that they could have done better in front of the group. And you got to be real sensitive about that in my mind.
Coach, you talked about staff a little bit a minute ago, but I just want to talk about I don't know if it's a tree of success people, but it's more like a forest. You've had John Calipari, Alan Gentry, R.C. Buford, Bob Hill, Bill Self, Bill Bano, and there's a lot more. I wanted to ask you about one guy that was an Air Force assistant, Pomona Pitzer, as the head coach, and came to you, Greg Popovich. What about him caused you, hey, he's a guy I want, and then did you know right away he was going to be as good as he was and successful as he was as a head coach in the NBA?
Well, I don't think anybody can predict the greatness of that guy. But again, you mentioned people say I have a tree. I do have a forest. I can go on and name so many names. But Greg played for Bob Spear. Coach Smith's first coaching job as a true assistant was at the Air Force Academy. He was a GA under Dick Harp at Kansas, but his first assistant's job was at the academy in Denver before it moved to Colorado Springs, and he developed a relationship with Coach Spear. Greg played for Coach Spear, so right away there was a connection between us. Hank Egan, hired Pop. I think Pop coached the Air Force Academy prep school before he went to Pomona-Pitzer. Matter of fact, I cut Pop. He tried out for the Denver Nuggets, and he was a great player. But we established a relationship through Coach Spear and Coach Egan and Coach Smith. And I remember where it really got important, our relationship, and it flourished. When Greg was at Pomona-Pitzer, he took a sabbatical, and he was going to spend time at Carolina and then with us. And then I forget the third school. Coach Smith used to invite me down to Chapel Hill all the time to talk basketball. And he did that with all his ex-players. And we'd share ideas. Well, Pop was there. And I told Pop, I think you can get more access coming with me and sitting on the bench with me at Kansas. So he ended up coming with me, stayed the rest of the season. And I just developed an unbelievable relationship with him. I found out, how bright he was, how inquisitive he was, how loyal he was. I had no idea he was going to be the best coach probably ever, or one of the best coaches. But I remember we played Pomona-Pitzer when he was coaching there after he went back. I gave his team the pregame speech. I told the kids, hey, your Division III school, this is going to be the greatest experience of your life, but we're going to kick your ass. But enjoy it. And before the game, they were taking pictures of Danny Manning, asking for autographs, and it was an unbelievable experience. And we were allowed to pay him enough money where he could support his basketball program. And then when I got the job at San Antonio, again, in almost all my hires, when I felt we really did good, was I hired guys that I had a personal relationship with. And I knew how loyal they were. I knew how much they cared about me. And he was one of my first calls. I took Alvin Gentry with me. I took Ed Manning with me. I took R.C. Buford with me. And Pop came with me as well. And that was before you had the enormous staff. But if you look at the people I had at Kansas, you mentioned Bob Hill, Mark Freidinger, Billy Bano, John Robick, John Calipari, Bill Self, R.C. Buford. I mean, it goes on. And all those guys, made me a better coach. And all those guys cared deeply about the game and the kids they were coaching. And I think that's what Pop's all about. He has this thirst for knowledge, and it never stops. He's not afraid to coach guys, whether it's Tim Duncan or Tony Parker or whomever he's given the opportunity. He's unbelievably honest with them. And he's sensitive about everybody that's around him. He wants everybody that's around him to have the same opportunities he's had, which is something that I think is what every head coach's responsibility should be. But I'm proud of him. He makes the game better. And a lot of the people that have allowed me to do what I do have made the game better.
Coach, I got a question from the people that are on the webinar. What do you think is more important, the individual skill trainer? Would you rather have them go to a trainer, or would you rather have them go out and play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-5 in their driveway?
I'd rather have them play with somebody better. I grew up across the street from a playground. And, I had an older brother who became a really fine coach. And I used to play with his guys. All the old great players from New York would come to my playground. Guys like Connie Hawkins and Roger Brown and Artie Heyman and even Red Holtzman and people like that. And from the time I was a little boy, I'd go to that playground and I'd hope that I'd get chosen to play 3-on-3. And if you lost, you had to wait maybe an hour or 2 hours to get back on the court. I was playing against guys that were better than me. I never heard about a skill coach. I don't know what a developmental coach is. I just know what a coach is. And the way you learn how to play is to play with better players and to work on skills that are going to help you, that are basketball specific. So when you do play the game, you have an understanding of how to guard, how important it is to take great shots, and how important it is to be part of a team. And that comes from playing in a structure that winning is really important. I'll give you an example. When I got to SMU, everybody told me AAU ball was a disaster. And I was really skeptical about that until I went to see, the AAU games. And there were so many unbelievable coaches out there teaching kids that would never have had an opportunity to travel to Las Vegas or go to Orlando, go to Indiana where they were having AAU events. They were able to stay in hotels and, get meals that they never possibly would have gotten before. And I thought there was a lot of good things. But then there were some bad things because I thought a lot of times kids went from one game to the other without understanding whether they won or lost. And I think when you play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, winning means something. And so I think playing in an atmosphere that you're improving your game against other people is more important than individual workouts. Nick, I'm not against individual workout guys, but I go to a pro practice now before a game and I see one guy gets a rebound, one coach throws it to another coach, who throws it to another coach, who throws it to the player who takes a shot. And it's either a three-point shot or maybe a driving shot. But most of the time, it's just an outside shot. And my whole thing is, I was taught, let's try to get a great shot with the right guy taking the shot with a chance to get fouled, which if it's a chance to get fouled, it's going to be a high percentage shot, chance to rebound the ball offensively, and a chance to get back on defense. So I'm a little different there, and maybe that's why, people look at me and think that the game's kind of passed me by.
Oh, I don't think that. My question, Coach, is as you go to all these practices, people have you in, what are some of the characteristics good to great programs have regards to their level of play? Like, what do you see that's common trait? What do you see that they really do well? And when you walk into a practice, when do you know, oh, he's a really good offensive coach, defensive coach, and what they emphasize?
Well, I get nervous about this offensive and defensive kind of situation. That's good for football, but I don't think it's good for basketball. And, and on my staff, I never had a first, second, or third assistant because I always wanted when somebody called me up and said, hey, Larry, we're interested in this guy. What's his strength? I said, he's a basketball coach. And they said, well, is he defensive or offensive? No, I said, he's a coach. He makes players better. So when I go to a practice, it's like going to a classroom. And you can tell right from the beginning whether these coaches, one, the head coach has confidence in his assistants to allow them to participate in what they're doing. And two, you can tell right away their values based on all the drills they do. and by hearing their voice, how they're not afraid to coach people and hold kids accountable, because I think that's really important. And then I listen to the positive and negative responses because, you know, I think that's very important. And then in a lot of cases, you know, I always used to worry that I might have failed in that regard. But I think every coach has to have a value system where the players completely understand it. And for me, when people ask me to come to practice and kind of critique their team or give input, it's amazing how I leave and I'm the one that always learns. And I think every coach, you know, has to have that in his mindset. Don't be afraid to be inquisitive and try to learn as much as you can about the game, because the important thing is to give the kids the best chance of being successful and to win. And the thing that stands out mostly in my mind when I do go to watch people practice, you can tell the coaches that really care about the kids and how invested they are in the well-being of the kids that they're given the opportunity to coach. Those are the ones that I leave practices, you know, with a big smile on my face. And 99% of the time, that's something that's obvious to me when I watch people coach, because I think most of the people that are doing this love the game and love the kids and respect the people that are around them. So I'm really comfortable with that when I do get the opportunity to watch other people coach.
Coach, when I run into people like yourself, I always think, I mean, once you're a coach, you're always a coach. But if you were going to go back on the court right now in college or pro, what would you do offensively? What would things that you would really try to implement?
Well, again, you know, like I said before, I'd look at things that, you know, people are doing both on the college level and pro level and try to figure out a way we could put those things into what we do. So we got a chance to practice against it every single day and get better. And then with the people around me, you know, coaching with me and the players that I would be allowed to coach, I would respect their input, because we would probably tweak some of the things that other people were doing and hopefully make them apply to the people I was coaching. But my values would never change. I'd still be working on fundamentals. We'd still have an early offense where we would try to get an easy shot. I would still make us run on every play so we'd have more time, you know, to go down the offensive end and get a good shot, not even, and really get a great shot and then know who is taking it. We'd spend a lot of time, you know, one-on-one defense. We'd spend a lot of time on shell. We do shell every single day. And then we'd be brutally honest with each player on our team about their strengths and weaknesses and how they can make us better. And if there were things that they didn't do well, it was our job every single day to make them do it better. For them to know, hey, there's a trust, this coach really cares. But basically, to me, if your team's going to guard, if your team's going to play hard, generally your team's going to be unselfish. And being unselfish and making your teammates better is everything. So if guys wanted to become better shooters or work on certain things, I would hope our staff would always be there to help them. But basketball is a game of 5-on-5. And it's vital that everybody has a role, both offensively and defensively. And your values on how you're going to play every single night has to be there every day at practice. Because I tell my team, you can have a bad night shooting, but if you can't guard and you don't rebound the ball and you don't take care of the ball, you're not going to have a chance to be successful. and those values would never change.
Coach, are you okay if we keep you like 10 more minutes?
Oh yeah, I'm looking for things to do, and this is like the highlight of my day, getting to share what I've been taught. So I appreciate that.
You've been fantastic. I'm going to ask you stats, halftime of the game. What stats would stick out to your mind? You wanted to know right away to know if your team was playing well. And then at the end of the game, what were the things that stuck out? You'd say, I knew we weren't playing very well. These are the indicators that I knew why we lost or we won.
Well, the first thing, I would always tell my team is if we could win a game when we shot like 35%, that was really what we had to be about, because that would mean we rebounded the ball well, we defended like crazy, and we took care of the ball. So usually at halftime, we were concerned about our shooting percentage and the number of shots we got up. We would really be concerned about the number of free throws we took and the number of free throws we allowed. We went into every quarter, in the NBA, we wanted 4 one-shot fouls every quarter because, after the fourth foul, you're in the bonus. And it was the same situation in college. We wanted 6 one-shot fouls, each half. We wanted to make sure we got more offensive rebounds than our opponent. We hoped to hold their field goal percentage down. We hoped to force turnovers and get deflections. And we wanted to keep from giving up easy baskets. That was things we looked at. There are good turnovers and bad turnovers. I was a turnover machine when I was in college. I had to be reminded so many times by Coach McGuire and Coach Smith that, when we played home, I needed to throw the ball more to the team wearing the white shirts and the home uniform than the other team. But a lot of times they didn't want to prohibit me from trying to make plays, things that I saw. But again, the values never changed. It was about getting a good shot, shooting more free throws, taking care of the ball, rebounding the heck out of the ball, and cutting down on another team's field goal percentage. It wasn't different many times. And then, again, there might have been some specific things you went into the game trying to cut down, maybe playing against Kobe. He's going to score, but you wanted to cut down his percentage and keep him off the free throw line. So those were things that we had discussed before the game, and at halftime we talked about if our goals were met at that time.
Coach, these are questions from the people that are on the call or on the webinar. How does Coach feel about young players and how they play today, their drive? Is it the same as before?
No, if we look at, I think young players are unbelievably gifted, more athletic, so much more talented. But I don't know if they accept coaching the same way. I think a lot of us are afraid to coach the young kids. If you look at the old games in the NBA, you never see any young players out on the court. You see Boston playing the Lakers, and Magic was there, and Larry Bird. You see Indiana playing the Knicks when, Reggie was playing against Patrick Ewing. You see the Bad Boys. You see the team I got coached in 2004. Young players earned the right to play by what they did in practice and were taught by the older players. It wasn't just given to them the opportunity to play. They had to earn it. And older players were there to help the young players grow and develop and get better. I'm not against LeBron or Kevin Garnett or Kobe or people like that coming out of high school and going into the NBA. But I'm against this idea that every kid should put their name in the draft. Because so many of them aren't ready. And college, to me, is the greatest minor league system there is in the world. I'm against this thing about young players putting their name in the draft, and then if they don't get drafted, they can't go back to school. That drives me crazy. That's so unfair because so many young players are told that they can play in the NBA and don't realize how difficult it is, and how much better the level of play on the NBA, when you're in the NBA than it is in college. But when you play for John Calipari or Bill Self, or Mark Turgeon, or, I can go on and on, the unbelievable coaches in college. When you get to the NBA, because you've had that experience to play for people like that hold you accountable, that aren't afraid to coach you, when you do get to the NBA, you're going to accept coaching. You're going to respect the minutes you get, and the people around you are going to help your growth. Shane Battier went 4 years to Duke, and I remember a lot of NBA scouts telling me, well, he was 22, he's not going to get any better. And that blows my mind. Kareem went 4 years to college. I can go on and on about so many of the great ones that went 4 years to college. And living away from home, having to go to class, being held accountable, not being afraid. Coaches weren't afraid to coach you in college. And now some of these young kids, as soon as they enroll in college, they got one foot out the door ready to go to the NBA. And a lot of people, when they don't do well, say the kid was a failure. No, the system failed them. So I wish we could do it like Boston did with Larry Bird. They drafted him, and he stayed in school and then went to Indiana, went to the Celtics. Why not be able to draft a kid out of high school, let him go to college, put his money in escrow, and then when it's time and they think he's ready to play in the NBA, then you let him play. I think that'd be a lot better.
Coach, next question is this. Your first year with the Pistons, you win the NBA championship, 54-28. Next year, what was the mindset going into year two with that team? How do you set the stage for trying to repeat? What do you do?
Well, that team got better. We made an unbelievable trade and got Rasheed and Mike James in the middle of the year. And, you watched the game last night. We played 11, 12 guys, and they all made a contribution. The next year, Memo Okoro was a free agent. We lost him. We lost Corliss Williamson. We lost Eldon Campbell. We lost Mike James. We didn't do much to add to that team. The only one we added really was Antonio McDyess, who was tremendous for Memo. But I got sick. I missed 17 games, and we lost the home court and ended up losing to San Antonio in Game 7. But I didn't have to do anything with that team. Joe Dumas assembled a great group with John Hammond. I had an unbelievable staff. The players held each other accountable and loved one another. And there was, this, I think, attitude that, the way we play was the right way. And there wasn't a selfish bone in anybody's body. People tell me that team never had any superstars. And I look at the guys we had, like Rip Hamilton and Chauncey and Tayshaun and Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace. Nobody can tell me those guys weren't superstars. We focus so much on the offensive end when we pick people as stars instead of the contributions guys make on both ends that enable you to win. So I blew that last series against San Antonio. We lost Game 5 Robert Ory hits a three when we were talking. And one of my best players all year, I allowed our players to make basketball plays based on their ability because I trusted them. And we happened to, try to double Ginobili, and Ginobili was good enough to throw it to Ory, and Ory made a three, and we lost Game 5. We come back and win Game 6, and in Game 7 we got in foul trouble against San Antonio, and I went small, which I very rarely did with that team. The year before with Corliss, we went small, and San Antonio made a run, and we lost at the end of the game. And, when I look back on it, I probably should have been smart enough to stick with the lineup that got us there.
My last question, Coach, is this. In practice, how often did you go that 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3? I know Coach Knight did a lot of that, up to 4-on-4 stuff. How could you utilize it in practice, and how often did you do it?
We did it all the time. Will Robinson was the first black coach that ever got a chance to coach at a high level in college. And John McClendon, those two guys I used to talk to all the time. They told me, if you want to teach your kids how to play and learn who could play 3-on-3 full court every day. And I never forgot that. But, we did a lot of breakdown drills. And most of the breakdown drills during practice were on defense, either playing 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And a lot of them were full court, which made it even more difficult. My practices, a lot was given to me by my assistant coaches, and a lot of the input came from the older players when I was a pro coach on what we needed to work on. But we did shell drill every single day. We did a transition defense every single day. We did 1-on-1 defense both on the perimeter and on the post every single day, big and small. We didn't break it up very much because I thought the more we put the big guys in difficult situations defensively, the more athletic they would become. I'll give you one example. We traded for Mutombo when I was in Philly the year we went to the finals. And we got to Dikembe, and I asked Dikembe, how'd they play pick and roll, in Atlanta? And he kind of looked at me really kind of funny, and he said, Larry, how do you play ball screens? I said, well, on the side, Dikembe, in the scoring area, we either hard hedge or double. And if it's a great player, we generally double it just to get it out of his hands. In the middle of the court, we influence them one way, but we hard hedge. And I said, late clock, we switch. And I'm against switching a lot. I told our guys, we switch to take something away, or if somebody gets cracked or gets screened. But generally on high ball screens, we influence them one way. Generally, even if he's right-handed, we push him left, so everybody knows it's a high ball screen. I tell the point guard, don't ever expect help, so you get into your guy. Well, Dikembe told me, he said, Coach, I'll do whatever your team does. If you want me to hard hedge or trap or, whatever you decide, whatever your team does, I'm willing to do it. And that to me was an unbelievable thing, because he was willing to do something that was difficult for him, but knew it was in the best interest of our team. And eventually, by coaching him, I always made sure that we would challenge guys to do things that were difficult, because you could always go back. And Pop told me, because we see so many defenses now with so many ball screens, Pop always told me, Coach, let's not do our best ball screen defense early in the game. Because if they can beat our best, you know, when we have to go to something else, it's going to be very difficult for us. So that was it.
Great answer, Coach. Troy, go ahead.
I know when we spoke earlier in the season, you just gotten back from going to some games and you were getting ready to head to some games. So I know you still watch a lot of games. From a collegiate perspective, taking your guys out of itself, Jay Wright, Calipari, Turgeon, are there any young coaches in the collegiate game now that you see that you think are really, really good and could be the next wave of big name coaches, either mid-level coaches or lower level or anywhere?
I respect them all, but I'll tell you something that I learned when I went to SMU. One, I was fortunate. I had an unbelievable staff. Tim Jankovich, was the coach in waiting, and being out of the game for a while, he helped me in so many ways. But my whole staff was phenomenal. But the thing I told those guys, we played a lot of mid-major schools early in the season, and it blew my mind because I used to tell my staff, God, these guys can really coach. The only difference between some of these guys on mid-level or the lower level is that they don't have the personnel. So, it'd be hard for me to single out anybody because I think there's so many great coaches, guys that I look forward to watching, their teams play. But I did find out that coaches that we never even heard of, would just blow my mind on their ability to teach and get their players to play the right way.
So before we let Coach go, I just want you to know, because Coach has talked a lot about his practice. He's got an all-access practice with Championship Productions. He's also got mastering the secondary break into the pick-and-roll offense and defensive skill development, and secondary and half-court offense. So if you want to – Coach talked about a lot of stuff in an hour and 15 minutes. My last question to you, Coach, is this. Advice. What if you were going to give advice to one high school coach, one guy getting his first job, what would you say?
Well, surround himself with a staff that loves him, is going to be loyal to him, and then loves kids and are doing coaching for the right reasons. Right now we're in this pandemic, and I've been getting calls from coaches all over, and I tell every coach, this is a great time to get better. Watch coaches that you admire. You can get those coaches, from your production and what you do, but you can get coaches on YouTube and video like a Dean Smith, like a Bobby Knight, like a Phil Jackson, like a Greg Popovich. Pat Riley, you can see all those old films and watch and learn, and then go back to your own team. Watch film based on how you used to coach years ago and how you've changed. And you can really learn a lot about yourself. And that's what I'm doing. I'm finding as much information about people that I admire and try to watch them as much as I can. So I will become a better coach, and I'll become a better asset if people really want me to share what I've been taught. But this is a great time to improve yourself as a coach by watching other people do things. I'll give you an example, one silly example. A lot of guys ask me about zone offense. I said, well, why don't you get out a Syracuse tape? Because Jim Boeheim, does a heck of a job. Everybody knows running a zone offense, running a zone defense. And you can watch how different people attack a 2-3 zone, and it's amazing how much you can get from that, because a lot of people are going to play zone. As the shot clock gets shorter and shorter, I think more and more people are going to play zone, or play different kinds of defense. But this is an unbelievable time to learn and get better. And then get on the phone with your kids that you coach and find out what they're doing now, and make sure you connect with them and your assistants and what your goals are. Because this is a really important time. And, a lot of people are making unbelievable sacrifices for our safety and stuff like that. But we can make some unbelievable sacrifices to become better coaches and better people in terms of the way we deal with our staffs and our players.
Coach, you used a quote before about talent and character. Do you remember that quote? Could you share it one more time?
Yeah. I had heard from Coach Smith that, talent is a gift from God. The character's a choice. And what he was trying to say is, God's given you a gift, but it's how you use it and what kind of person you are, what kind of teammate you are. And I think that was really something that stuck with me.
Coach, I can't say from the NABC and for Championship Productions and Troy and myself how much we appreciate your time, your knowledge, your willingness to share. Don't be surprised if I call you and ask you to come on again. I hope that would be okay.
I'd be thrilled. I hope what I said is helpful.
Oh,
because the only reason I got to do what I have done is because of the people that cared about me, took a personal interest in me, and shared ideas. So what you guys are doing is phenomenal. I can't imagine how fortunate people are to have the information that you guys give out, because there's so much to learn. And we have such a responsibility to help our kids and our assistant coaches get better. And you guys do a hell of a job in sharing that.
remember, Coach has got videos at Championship Production just because I think they're unbelievable. Coach mentioned another guy. There's 2 videos from Dean Smith from back in the day. They're unbelievable watches on his offense and then the scramble defense. We've got Joe Gallo coming up in 12 minutes. We've got John Moore coming up after that on culture, creating culture, and Joe Gallo on zone defense. And it's an unbelievable tape or presentation. Kevin Boyle's on the court with players. Greg Popovich is at 3 o'clock Central Time, and Matthew Driscoll on man and zone, how to beat man and zone defenses. Troy, Coach Brown, thanks again. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you in 12 minutes, everybody.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, take care. Thanks,
Coach.